By the way, we're going to do the JCSA at the end.
Okay.
This meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors to order for the purpose of the work session. Mr. Stevens, please call the roll.
Mr. McGlennon? Here. Ms. Larson?
Here.
Mr. Hippel? Here. Mr. Eisenhower?
Here. We need a motion to allow Ms. Sadler to participate remotely due to an illness that prevents her from attending the meeting.
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Stevens, call the roll.
Mr. McGlennon? Aye. Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, and Sue, you are with us on the meeting.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we need now a motion to amend the agenda to add an item under board considerations for a Busch Gardens discussion. Motion? Okay, Mr. Stevens, call the roll.
Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon? Aye. Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Well, I will do the introductions then. Those in attendance physically, we have Delegate Batten in the back of the room. Thank you, representing the 96th District. I believe we have Senator Norman and Senator Mason both on the telephone. Gentlemen, if you're there.
Mullins.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Wonderful. Okay.
Here.
And I think Delegate Mullen is supposed to be here.
He just walked in.
Just walked in. There he is. You're sneaky. Okay. So we have Delegate Mullen and Delegate Batten in the room, and Senator Norman and Senator Mason participating by telephone. We also have Neil Morgan, York County Administrator, participating by telephone, and I believe Kevin Limke is in the room. Very good. Good to see you, Kevin. We will then start the board discussions for Busch Gardens, and I will.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board, we've had a lot of ongoing conversations with Mr. Limke and our legislative group about reopening Busch Gardens in a safe manner. We thought we'd invite Mr. Limke here to sort of tell you what's been going on, some of the efforts they made, sort of where they are today, and how do we get it maybe pushed over the finish line to allow them to reopen in a manner that would make sense. And Phase 3 guidelines seem to let a lot of things happen that would happen out there, but the 1,000 patron limit is sort of a limiting factor for them. So with that, I turn it over to Mr. Limke, and I'll let him just give you some general discussion, and we'll go from there.
Good afternoon. So I can answer any questions about what we've been working on, but I figured I'd start just with a brief overview. This is a communication that I sent to the governor's office just a few days ago, and I think it's just a quick summary of kind of where we stand. So on behalf of our over 4,000 employees, based on the Phase 3 guidelines and the limit of 1,000 patrons to entertainment establishments, including theme parks, Busch Gardens and Water Country USA will need to remain closed. This also means our more than 4,000 employees will remain out of work, as well as a continuation of the negative economic impact our closures have on the greater Williamsburg area, as we are the second highest taxpayer in James City County and one of its top employers. We are extremely disappointed in this guidance, and it feels does not accurately take into account the comprehensive safety plan our parks have put forward to ensure the safety of both our guests and employees. Our plan was created in partnership with the Virginia Department of Health and our industry leaders across multiple states and jurisdictions, and feel strongly in the plan's ability to meet state safety guidance. We also continue to be confused by the grouping of entertainment businesses we are associated with in the guidance. Our parks are largely outdoor facilities spread across hundreds of acres, but we continue to be lumped in with businesses with unrelated models like bowling alleys and skating rinks. This lack of nuance and detail to reopening guidance is unlike anything we've seen in all other states in which our company operates. Based on this guidance and our need of several weeks to turn the business back on, we are looking at a closure well into July and perhaps later, which will be devastating to our business and the local economy. Water Country USA is at risk of not opening at all this season, which will impact millions of dollars in tax and related revenues for York County. Many hoteliers and restaurants have reached out to me explaining how dramatic the impact will be if we miss this peak summer season. We appreciate the collaboration and communication and want to continue to partner in order to find a way forward. Our goal is and has been a safe operation while putting our thousands of employees back to work and restarting our ability to drive economic growth in our region to so many businesses that rely on the visitation we bring to our area. We look forward to continuing this dialogue. So, based on the announcement then today, officially, this was based on the draft guidelines. Of course, it was formalized at the announcement today. The 1,000 patron limit does keep us out of business. It's not an economically sustainable model for us. As I mentioned, where we really struggle is understanding how our guidelines are lumped into, many indoor businesses, many smaller facilities. And we're looking to expand that and at least get some level of detail that would start to separate different industries. So I'd like to ask if there's anything, on the county's behalf that we can continue to push forward, or at the state level. We continue those conversations every day, but how can we, push forward in a more formalized way to get this spec going, and open to any collaboration and suggestions you may have.
Could you just briefly, you don't have to go into your entire plan, but could you just talk a little bit about what some of the safety precautions were that you were going to be putting in place?
Sure. So first and foremost, from a capacity standpoint, because that's, of course, a big question. You think of theme parks, you think crowds. We understand that capacity would be limited, certainly as in a first phase of our reopening. So reservations will be required in order to visit the park. And this, what I'll explain in these details are in place now at, for example, Busch Gardens in Tampa. So you'll need a reservation, which allows us to limit to the exact number of patrons that will arrive that day. And we have the ability to flex that up and down based on the regulations in place. When you arrive, we will be doing temperature screens for all guests. All guests will be required to wear masks, and all employees will be required to wear masks as well. All distancing, as far as 6-foot requirements, will be in place, similar to what you see in public now. So if you're in a queue line, if you're at the turnstile line, a culinary facility, markings will be on the ground, signage will be in place. Again, some of the best practices that you're seeing out there now will be part of our plan as well. PPE for our employees, so that will include gloves, safety masks, safety goggles, increased sanitation areas. So we have over 300 hand sanitizer stations that we're implementing throughout the park. So plenty of ability for people to, before they engage in an interaction or attraction, once they get off, they'll have the ability to wash their hands, and signage will be there to remind them. And what you see, some of the more nuanced things, like in our culinary operations, no buffet style, no interaction with the food from a guest standpoint. Everything would be moved to the employee side of it. Plexiglass barriers that you see in some of the retail areas. So all of those come into what we think is a pretty comprehensive plan, and one that is again in place now, not just in our company, but in other parks that are currently operating. Another key part of it is training of our team. So there's going to be a lot of protocols and regulations that they hadn't seen before, as well as the guests having not seen. So a training program that every employee will go through before we officially welcome guests back.
Thank you.
And Mr. Stevens, if we could have maybe a follow-up discussion on the proposal of looking at the area and how many people, based on the guidance other than the 1,000 limit, that we could accommodate.
Yeah, I don't know how in-depth Mr. Olympia would want to get, but he was trying to make an argument that he's got this much common space that is the public walkway. Are you able to talk about that a little bit for us, of what you're trying to argue is a reasonable, safe capacity for the park? Yep,
absolutely. So what we took a look at was at first acreage, but that doesn't maybe translate as well to what people are familiar with. So we took it down to square footage within the park. So the common area consisting of pathways and walkways, anywhere that you would be kind of free flowing throughout the park. and took that number and then divided it by 36 square feet, which is essentially the 6-foot requirement that each individual would need if everyone remained distant through the entire day. And then came up with an attendance figure that would allow us that safe distance and at the same time allow us to, from a revenue and economic standpoint to operate. So we have that, detailed out. That's a very conservative number in the way that it doesn't take into account retail shops, restaurants, other areas. This is just outdoor common space. So as people are in attractions, in buildings, that of course even lowers the number that are out on the pathway. So we have those figures, and I'm happy to share those as needed.
But, if you don't mind, what numbers are we looking at there?
So the attendance minimum there would be, we'll call it 5,000 to 7,000 as a rough estimate. Okay,
because when I not only have I worked in Busch Gardens but visited quite a few times. The 1,000 I can understand for smaller locations and that sort of thing, but you could put 1,000 people in your bathrooms alone. I mean,
yes.
And be safe.
Yes.
Not including the rest
true.
of the park. So it's amazing that the park is so spread out, and I know Busch Gardens does an outstanding job of safety, not only with the rides and everything else. I know you will continue with, keeping everybody distance and all. I'd like to talk to our General Assembly members and see if there's anything they can help us with as far as, raising those numbers up and speaking with the governor and discussing that, because y'all are a little bit of more of a unique facility than a bowling alley would be.
Yep.
So, and I can understand the frustration of, having we've got to do the same thing as a bowling alley does. Well,
yep.
I can understand, lanes and separation in lanes and just like we're doing up here in our meetings, separating and keeping a certain amount of people in and a certain amount of people out. And I think everybody's doing a good job of that across the state. So it'd be interesting to hear that, maybe what can be done, or if anything can be done as far as with the governor to it gets above our pay grade. We're feeling the pain that you're feeling.
Sure.
We have to look at the other elected officers and see what maybe there's something that that they may give us some advice on, maybe something they'd say we could do, or somehow we could help.
Sure. And on that point, again, on the theme park side of being different, we operate parks, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Florida, Texas, and California. Virginia is the only state out of that grouping that has not given specific guidance relative to our industry. Virginia is the only situation where our industry is lumped into, many other businesses, and that's what's, proven even more difficult to understand where the direction is going.
Mr. Lemke, thanks very much for coming in today. Could you, I know you've been monitoring this pretty carefully. Would you tell us a little bit about the experiences in those other states?
Sure. So I was there for the opening of Busch Gardens Tampa in person, which was great to see. Many of the things I mentioned are in place. Masks are required. Reservations are required. I will say, I think all parks are finding their way in the first couple of days, and that this goes across the industry. And they are in a very, very good place right now, where the feedback is largely positive on the safety efforts in place, and then balancing that with the experience. I think what's easy to forget is we want you to come here as an escape and have fun, right? So you can get bogged down with, okay, if I'm just worried about all of these regulations constantly. And I think what the parks have done a great job is balancing that. Allows you to still have the enjoyment, but at the same time feel comfortable. And we tweak the plan in some cases hourly, certainly daily at our parks. As you learn more of guest behavior, it's easy to put a plan on paper, but once you actually have guests in the park, you understand what's working, what's not, and our plan would certainly evolve as those patterns change as well. But they're in a good place. They are talking about increasing hours and number of days of operation as demand grows. So it's certainly headed in the right direction, which is very encouraging to see.
And what about the kind of levels of patronage that are allowed in these different parks?
So I probably can't get too specific on some of that, but Texas, for example, I'll say opened at a 25% capacity, where the Florida parks are closer to 30 to 50%. That demand has ramped up as word has gotten out and people have been able to plan, but there is a cap. And I can say, obviously, the cap is more than 1,000. It's more than 5,000 in most cases. But they are under a restriction and do monitor that through the reservation system.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tommy, and I'm not speaking for anybody else, but Monty and I have been working on this, and the reason I am impertinent in interrupting you is that we're pushing for a minimum of 5,000.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. And with you and Senator Mason on, if there's anything you would like to add, please feel free to.
Mr. Chairman, it's Monty.
Go ahead, sir.
Kevin, can you did I hear you say Virginia is the only state that has not provided specific guidance to parks?
That correct. So in Florida, the parks specifically presented their plan at a request of the governor. Now, of course, theme parks, are synonymous with Florida, so maybe a little bit different situation there. But Texas, I know, was specifically called out, and absolutely California was as well. Again, also a big theme park state. But yes, we are the only ones at this point that have not received specific guidance relative to our business.
And could you provide us with the, nothing fancy, but could you provide us with the guidance that was given to your operations by state? It is a little concerning in that Florida and Texas are not exactly states that we want to emulate right now.
Agreed.
But if you have specific guidance that comes from all states, that'll give Senator Norman, me, and Delegate Batten and Mullen the opportunity to go back and say, hey, we're not talking about a heavy lift to look individually at the parks in Virginia, and here are examples from other states that they provide.
Yep, absolutely. We'll get that to you.
Thank you.
And I'd open it up for Delegate Batten or Delegate Mullen to, if you have anything you'd like to add as well. Come on up to the.
I think I just have maybe two questions. One would be for Senators Norman and Mason, the 5,000 person limit. Is that, I mean, it seems like it might be easier to have just a percentage rather than a flat figure. Are you thinking that maybe that would like flex up and down over time? I just wasn't sure how the 5,000 was reached. So that question. And then I guess my second question would be, what is the park's full capacity? Busch Gardens, not Water Country.
Yeah. So in park at any given.
Okay. So Senators Mason or Norman, just curious about that 5,000.
What did he say the capacity was?
About
20 to 24,000.
24,000.
20 to 24.
24,000 the capacity. Okay. I think that was, I won't speak for Monty because he's much more responsible than I am, but I think that was a swag. It was 5 times what those numbnuts in Richmond were suggesting.
Okay. Then I guess I have another question for you.
It's not scientific.
What was that?
I said it was not scientific.
Well, but then beyond that, he's right. It was kind of a swag, but at the same time, then we worked with Kevin on his square footage number, and we looked at what we understood was kind of must-have to operate number, and then his number based on the social distancing and the square footage would have come out to about 6,800, and 5,000 is somewhere there in the middle.
Okay. And then the last question I have is about King's Dominion. Would this be the request that the senators were working on? Was it very specific to Busch Gardens, or has there been any communication with King's Dominion? Would that 5,000 apply to them as well? I don't know who can answer that question, so.
Well, King's Dominion had joined in a letter with Kevin back on June the 3rd. I honestly don't recall if they recited a visitor capacity or not. I mean, Kevin would know.
Yeah, so we have been speaking daily, really, with my counterpart at King's Dominion. So they are pursuing things on their end on a parallel path. In some cases, you know, we're doing it jointly. I don't want to speak for them on the 5,000 limit, but generally, again, it's a threshold, although on the very low end, you know, gets us to a point where we can be back in business.
All I have.
And I have not had any, in fact, I have been very careful to keep my conversations specific to Busch Gardens, Water Country. We're also looking out for Great Wolf Lodge, but that's a different discussion. I've been very careful to keep it specific to them because I think Kevin and his organization have put together a very impressive plan that we've been holding out to the governor's office and cabinet of, look, you know, they are very serious about this. They've been very detailed about this. This is seems to be a very workable plan. And so really hinging upon the work that they've done and just not knowing what King's Dominion done, they may have done a very good plan as well, but I just didn't want to muddy the waters with that conversation.
I would just
I could just throw something. Excuse me, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Parenthetically, I mean, King's Dominion is a little bit different venue, I think, if you take the geographic surroundings and things. I know a fair amount about tourism and visitor attendance in the historic triangle just through osmosis over the years. And Kevin, I'm sure, as he mentioned, has heard from hotelers and restaurateurs and stuff. It is absolutely imperative for the historic triangle economy that we get Busch Gardens open, and we get it open with a substantial attendance. As some of you know, I own a local hotel, and I said this on a Zoom call not long ago. We've got about 120 rooms. 2 weekends ago, we were euphoric when we had 34 of them rented. Fortunately, you know, I'm not leveraged, but if we don't get the visitors coming in to Busch Gardens, and Busch Gardens has the ability to bring in visitors much quicker than Colonial Williamsburg, and that's not a hit on Colonial Williamsburg. I happen to know their model really well. But if we do not start getting visitors coming in substantial numbers to Busch Gardens, the historic triangle economy is going to hemorrhage. And there are going to be a lot of casualties. There are a number of properties and restaurateurs that are hanging on right now with the anticipation that Busch Gardens will open up, CW will gradually increase. But Busch Gardens results in heads in beds, and heads in beds result in more people eating. And it's just that simple. And I know, you know, we all agree with this, but I am seeing the numbers. I am seeing what is going on in Virginia Beach as they ramp up. And people will continue to drive by us on 64 because they know they can go to the beach. That social distancing is a fiction down there. They will continue to go to the Outer Banks where it is something of a fiction. The Outer Banks is killing them, is absolutely killing them since they've opened up. The only people suffering in the Outer Banks are the Airbnbs that people are a little suspect of, and the restaurants that rely upon buffets. I just cannot stress the financial importance of Kevin and his team getting opened up, and on a strong bipartisan basis, we have got to convince the administration to allow it. And maybe Mike and Monty know better, but we have got to do it. And this is not a standard approach that fits all. I apologize for this soliloquy, but I am very concerned.
Thank you, Senator Norman.
Mr. Chair, could I ask the legislators a question? I'm not sure if they would have an answer, but I'm kind of curious if they might have an idea as to when we could possibly get an answer as to a solution to this problem. Reason being, as parents and grandparents are booking their vacations now, and I think time is of the essence to come up with some sort of a solution so that we can get people booked before they decide to look elsewhere. Thank you.
Right. I would offer Delegate Mullen the opportunity to.
Well, I appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, giving me the opportunity to be able to address you on this important issue. I also want to share in Senator Mason and all of our elected officials truly gratitude for the work that Kevin and his team have been able to do. I think we all realize that the business of the peninsula is tourism, that that is the backbone on which we build the rest of our economy, and that I think we are more uniquely situated than many other parts of the Commonwealth in being able to offer social distancing requirements. I myself have been very leery of some of the ways that the phases have been set up. In particular, seeing the fact that we are lumping up large parts of entertainment industry into one section doesn't seem to make sense to me in any sort of practical fashion. I don't want to speak for any other member of the delegation, but I know myself and my office have been in constant contact with the governor's office, with the cabinet secretaries, as well as from the secretariats, just to see what we can do about moving this forward. I am particularly impressed by the plan that Kevin and his team have put together, and I think that it offers us a safe balance between some of the more extreme reopenings that we've seen in other parts of the country that are now starting to see upticks in COVID-19 infections, and some of the more extreme quarantines that we've seen where you're starting to see really horrific economic imbalances. And so Virginia, I think, by and large, has tried to keep that balance as much as possible. But when you're dealing with a unique circumstance like the peninsula and a unique facility like Busch Gardens, I think that a one-size-fits-all rule is not as helpful. And I know for my part and for the part of the people in my office, we will continue to be working to see if we can find some discretion coming from the administration in regards to that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say a couple of things with respect to Senator Mason. I think Texas and Florida had a few other problems than the tourism. There was some debate over mask use, et cetera. So I don't think we can quite compare the two. But I understand the comment. I do want to say thank you to everyone that is in attendance today, and I appreciate, Kevin. I've been talking to you through my work on the Tourism Council for quite some time now, and I called Senator Norman last Friday because I've been a little frustrated I'm trying to watch my words. I've been a little frustrated by the situation in Virginia Beach because I do feel that there is an unequalness to the opening up of tourism that is going on here. And if you're going to allow Virginia Beach to open, and I know from personal experience that there's not a whole lot of social distancing going down there, and I'm not that's between them and the state, but I do believe that to keep us closed is not right. I won't use fair, but it's not right. I also think what we need to remember is that if you don't feel comfortable going, we're not going to make anyone go to Busch Gardens. You have to do what is comfortable for you. But just to give you some idea, 42% of the travelers that come to our greater Williamsburg area come here to visit Busch Gardens. They visit other areas, but 42% visit Busch Gardens. So it is a very important to our local economy to get people back here. And so I'll hold it at that. But I just want to say thank you so much to everybody and also to the county for getting this presentation put together. I think it's very important. And I notice nobody is comfortable answering when we think we might get an answer from the Commonwealth. So
I would like to echo your comments and thank all of our legislators for everything you've been doing, especially the work you've done with our staff and with Mr. Lemke. I would think that what we would really like to see is to have us continue to press that. I think there's a very legitimate scientific, if you will, or mathematical background to what you're asking for that meets the intent of all the safety regulations that have been proposed. I think that the 1,000 person is rather arbitrary. I think the way you've made the case makes a case that it can be done and can be done safely. I would hope that we would have our legislative folks continue putting their pressure on the administration to try to come to some reasonable solution so that we could get this open. I know we are going to be about 3 weeks till our next meeting. However, I would assure the board that if there's a need to meet in the interim for any matter, we could do that on special meeting notice. But I think at this point it would be very beneficial to allow a little opportunity for to see if we could get some sort of result from the administration.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add a comment or two. First of all, I think everybody understands the importance of Busch Gardens and tourism generally to our economy. I also think we all understand that there are a lot of people who are very, very concerned about the impact of this pandemic on their own health and safety. And there's a lot of nervousness and concern and uncertainty because we haven't been through something like this in our recent history. So at the same time, the Commonwealth has started moving toward allowing larger congregations of individuals in smaller settings. And so perhaps a way to address this question is, and maybe the members of the General Assembly have already been working on this and I don't know it, or the governor's staff, but maybe thinking about asking to break out from the category of entertainment and rather be considered in terms of size of potential congregation might be a more appropriate approach. I happen to work at an institution in my day job that will be welcoming back thousands of students on a campus that is not of the same size. We know that there are high schools that will have over 1,000 students enrolled which may be open this year. What are the protocols that would be that the state is expecting to be carried out there, as they're already starting to roll forward plans that would allow those facilities to reopen to on-campus or experiences. Workplaces like the shipyard have large numbers of employees who are sharing spaces and so forth. So I just wonder whether the important thing here is not that this is an entertainment venue, but rather the numbers of people that would be passing through the gates. And you know, I understand the point, and I certainly appreciate the point that if you don't want to go to Busch Gardens, if you feel unsafe about participating in a theme park, you don't have to do that. I don't think that's the real point, though. The point is whether it has a spread beyond, because there will be so many people coming in from out of the community and going to restaurants and retail shops and so forth. So I think really trying to focus it on a different aspect might be more helpful in getting better guidance. And if the Commonwealth hasn't been thinking strongly about how we address such large populations and what criteria to put in place and what protocols to expect, they certainly should be. I know there are a lot of my colleagues who are very nervous about the prospect of returning to classrooms. I know there are a lot of elementary school, high school, and middle school teachers who are very nervous about that question. And so what is it that we're expecting to happen in each of those levels? Just a thought.
I got one thing to add for you. Close. And I would agree with Ruth on the Virginia Beach thing. That's kind of, you know, kind of irritating that, you know, maybe we should put more sand in Busch Gardens and call it a beach. And then we can do whatever we want. I mean, I'm just going to say it plain and simple. You know, it's crazy to hold something hostage when we know better and we know how to do things. And Kevin and his team are putting together a great plan as far as how to be safe. I could understand if Kevin was coming and saying, look, I just want to open the whole darn park, drop everybody in there. I don't care what they do. But it's not. He's saying these are rules, these are regulations, these are what we're going to abide by. These are the safety issues. These are the limitations. So I think giving the governor and our group of legislators some time to, you know, talk to the governor and wake him up and tell him exactly what we're looking for and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it safe is an important part of this. And I had a lot more comments, but I'm going to hold those because I'm going to give the governor a chance to weigh in on it and tell us, you know, his positive position on opening Busch Gardens back up. And, you know, because it's going to take Busch Gardens a while to get up and operating too. So it's not like the switch can go on tomorrow. And I read a few emails and a few things in the paper about Ruth and I want to open Busch Gardens up when this whole thing started. That was not what we were doing. And we were concerned with not only Busch Gardens, but the economic problems that we'd have in the county for schools and everything else. So it was a bigger picture. It wasn't opening Busch Gardens up. We didn't intend to open Busch Gardens up at that time. We were just saying we have to start looking at certain things. So I think giving the governor a chance to go at this and look at it, and our legislators, thank y'all very much for attending this meeting and doing everything y'all can. I know you're all on it. We're all on the same team trying to get Busch Gardens up and running safe for our community. And I agree. If you're scared of it, please stay home. Please stay in your house. If you're worried about it, the best thing you can do is stay at home. That's the safest place you can be. And the others that want to venture out, well, then that's up to you. But, you know, we're America and we're born to be free, and that's the way we should be. And I'll save my rest for our next meeting. Thank you.
I did have one follow-up with our legislators, if I could.
Already had.
Senator Norman had mentioned that he had been talking to the governor's office. I believe Senator Mason had as well. I wondered have you gotten any type of reception, any type of how they're receiving the reopening? Have you gotten anywhere, in other words, I guess?
So, you know, regarding linking that to the question of when will we get an answer, you know, Senator Norman and I have talked to the governor's office every day since probably last Thursday, maybe save Father's Day. We talked to each other that day. So we're pressing daily for movement. The second I'm off this call, I will send to the cabinet secretary that we're the only state that does not specifically nuance parks. So as soon as I can get the guidance from the other states, I'll be forwarding that. I got another text during this call from another contact there saying in meeting, so we are talking to them every day. And I think the governor's announcement today of July 1 gives us more urgency to share with them in that we need an answer and we need some specific, we need to nuance this situation and we can't just broad brush it. So I don't have a timeline, getting it on the governor's plate, but Tommy and I have both brought it to his attention and to cabinet level officials, and they know we're working and asking them about it every day. Before we leave, I would like to ask Kevin to enlighten us on how, if say you get the 5,000 number X day, how long does it take you to get the car park up and running? What's your opening timeline?
So at a minimum, it would be 2 weeks. It's more likely closer to 3. Some of that depends on the availability of our team. And while we've tried to stay in contact with as many as possible, the last time we saw some of these folks was early March. So not a concern as much on the full-time side, but when you start getting into the part-time and seasonal folks, it depends on the percentage of folks that are available and what type of hiring we would have to do. But based on the other parks timelines, we're generally looking at a 2 to 3 week ramp-up time.
This is Tommy again. Mike, have you gotten any additional encouraging information that maybe Monty and I have not up to this point?
Oh, goodness, Senator. So my timeline was similar to Senator Mason's. I started getting on the phone on Thursday. I have spoken with the senior-most members of the governor's individual staff. I have also been, as of like...
Does that go beyond Clark? Mike, does that go beyond Clark?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Thank you.
I have also been in touch with the Undersecretary of Transportation and Trade, Commerce and Trade, pardon me, who I was playing phone tag with as late as a little close to 7 o'clock last night. I have not gotten the responses that I would like at this point, but I have gotten multiple reassurances that they are working on it. And what working on it means, I have not gotten a clear answer yet.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I was hopeful maybe you had some information we did not.
I guarantee you that as soon as I have some information, this is going to be the group that I will share it with.
I'm sure.
Okay.
Thank you. I did just want to follow up to Supervisors McGlennon's point about it, but again, it's why, we don't wear them in here, but this is why these are important if you are out and about in our community, in our grocery. And I have to say, I think we're doing a pretty good job. And so I'm sure that our visitors will wear their mask at Busch Gardens. And then when they go to our restaurants, James City County, York, Williamsburg, they will continue to wear their mask. And so that will help keep spread at a minimum. So anyway, but thank y'all.
Thank you. I think that basically covers the discussion. If there's nothing else, I will thank our delegation, Senator Norman, Senator Mason. Thank you so much for joining us by telephone, and Delegate Batten and Delegate Mullen, thank you for being here in person. We really appreciate your help on that. And Mr. Lemke, I think you've gotten pretty much what they need, and if you can forward the information on to our staff as well, we'll keep trying to get the information up there and get done what we can get done. Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. We will now move to our second, third, and fourth. We have 3 consent agenda items, if you will. I would like to see if I can get a motion to approve items 2, 3, and 4, which is grant award, James City County Child Health Initiative for $270,000. Supplemental funding request, Children's Services Act, $281,885. And then consent revisions to Chapter 5 of the James City County Personnel Policies and Procedures Manual.
Motion for approval?
We have a motion. Mr. Stevens, you call the roll?
Ms. Larson,
Aye.
Ms. Sadler,
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon,
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We now go to number 5, which is our Workforce Housing Task Force finding his recommendation, and I believe we're going to have Ms. Vinroot, Mr. Holt, doing a tag team for us.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The board may remember at the September 24th board work session, staff presented an overview of the findings and recommendations of the Workforce Housing Task Force, and we highlighted at the time those priority recommendations which did not require any new staffing or any new budgetary resources. Staff is back to you today to seek additional guidance and direction on one of the themes of those recommendations: facilitating the private sector production of new workforce housing by working with local community partners to leverage state and federal funding resources. Staff has become aware of a supplemental community development block grant funding opportunity, or CDBG. That application cycle will open this fall. You may recall that CDBG funding covers several categories of projects designed to assist in the creation of affordable and workforce housing. County has directly administered several successful CDBG projects in the past, and we have one currently underway to help rehabilitate existing homes in the county. Staff is not requesting board approval of any such new applications today, but staff would appreciate receiving direction from the board if such a partnership with local partners is desirable. If so, staff would spend the next 2 months exploring opportunities and possibly developing an application for your consideration at your September board meeting. It's staff's belief that we could develop an application within currently available resources, and that by leveraging CDBG funds, efforts to provide housing with price points that are targeted to the James City County workforce could be advanced. However, developing such an application would require some dedicated staff time, Mr. Voller's time to be specific, over the next few months. And again, but we didn't want to begin such an effort without the benefit of receiving direction from you all as a board, and or first seeing if there might be some consensus in moving that direction. Myself and Ms. Vinroot are available for questions, and that concludes my presentation.
So
You want to go ahead?
I'm interested, Ruth Larson is interested in you all moving ahead with that effort. I hope my colleagues will join me, and I look forward to going through the process and seeing what develops.
Do you have a particular target in mind?
No, but you know, with right off here off the top of my head, I mean, we work semi-regularly with 2 local nonprofit partners that do regular business in the county. Those 2 come to mind in terms of potential partnerships.
Would this be the grant program that we're talking about here? Would it be one that would both focus on rehabilitation of existing housing and construction of new housing in an area that perhaps is?
That could be for new housing. Yeah, I mean, one of the funding programs that CDBG covers is construction of infrastructure, and certainly with any new development project, infrastructure can be a rather large sizable portion of the project for sure. So
I would offer that this afternoon, Ms. Larson and I spent about 30 minutes on the phone with housing partnerships with relation to Jamestown Terrace. And they are, I was reminded during the call today, they are now partnering, I believe, with the, what's the name of the organization? People Inc., who is an organization that has done a lot of work with the low-income tax credit housing. I was reminded, I had forgotten, that that project does have the low-income tax credit money already approved. What they're in the process of trying to do now is to meet their 10% requirement of having their investment in it. And they went over a bunch of timelines and stuff that they have, which is going to give them some time until I think about next June to finalize things. I anticipate they'll be coming back to us, but I think they would be one of the ones that interested in some of possibly the block grant as well. I think that one of the things that I find is they will come back probably for one more proffer adjustment, because this is, I think you remember we converted this completely to rental housing as opposed to whatever, but I think it's shaping up to be something that will really address the needs at the 60% and below, or even 80% and below, pretty much exhaustively through that community. So I'd sort of like to give them the green light to go ahead and start looking at the opportunities to work with. Like he says, this is not a specific thing. They'll bring specific things back to us as we go forward. One of the things I think is, we've had this discussion before. I think that over the years, we've had many things about affordable housing policy. It's nice to have one about housing for purchase. That doesn't work very well in the long haul. The market tends to determine what that will be. But that the ability to have these income tax credit programs where we can have rental housing at higher density is probably the best possible way we can afford to deal with some of our workforce housing issues in the short term. So I'm very much interested in having them proceed with this. I would also even go a little bit further, and I don't know whether the rest of the board is there or not, but so you can speak up and tell you. I think that it's an opportunity for staff over the next 3, 4, 5 months to go out and do a little research about what's available out there. What we need to find is we need to find pieces of property that maybe already are zoned for that kind of density, or could be zoned, and they're on transportation lines or major connector roads or whatever. And I would be interested in seeing what the resources available, what the inventory available is out there. Because if we want to be proactive in this, I think our role is we're going to have to partner in public-private partnership with some of these nonprofits to get this kind of thing done. And I think it's an appropriate way to do it. But one of the ways we can help is by identifying and maybe referring properties on which these things can be developed in the future. So I'll throw it open to the rest of the time.
Ms. Vinroot going to have another presentation, or is now the time to ask maybe if you could talk about the AMI or explain that a little bit, or how's this working? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. We're here to tag team. So, again, area median income is something that's figured up by HUD for our geographic area. It's not specific to James City County. It's for our statistical area, and those numbers are published periodically. And based on that, we work with our FMS group here to calculate those affordability price points for purchase. And again, based on the state and federal programming levels, those are targeted, and the price points are typically targeted at those making 80% of area median income, 60% of area median income, really all the way down to 30%.
So right now, would you know off the top of your head what would be 60% of an income?
I do. I figured that question might come up. So find that piece of paper.
Because I think sometimes when we start talking about this, people get very nervous, and I think this is a great thing, but I don't really want it here. So I think the more we can explain that kind of thing, the better.
Sure, and I won't do it justice. The Workforce Housing Task Force spent a lot of time, and there's a lot of information and a lot of current statistics about the occupations that and specifically the workforce that makes up James City County, making that. Again, I don't have those memorized. I don't have those summarized here today, but that's an invaluable resource, and we'll look to get some more of that information posted on our website. So, as of May 22nd, so sort of right here in the middle of everything, HUD did update its area median income for our statistical area. It did go up a little bit from about a year and a half ago. It was just a little over $79,000. It's gone up to $82,500. Again, that's based on statistical information looking backwards, so it's not going to reflect a lot of the current situation. So with a current area median income of $82,500, really that 80% price point, that workforce housing price point, would be targeted at folks who have an annual income of about $66,000. And the 60% of area median income translates to just under $50,000. Sense of workforce and what that means for James City County.
And I think you would find that a large portion of our school teachers fall in this category. Probably a lot of our first responders as well. So, it's one of those things that I think it's one of the few ways we can probably make it possible for those who work here to live here. I'm talking, be interesting figures.
Yeah, I think it gives us the ability to get more done at a quicker time. I think boiling down to, and we may want to look at. I know we're always calling it workforce housing and that sort of thing, and after a while it kind of gets a stereotype of some sort, and everything does if you use it long enough. Starter homes, something for a person to get their first time, some way to wrap it into this is a first time, and I'm starting out, this is, and trying to add that in there somewhere might help with some of our advertisement and that sort of thing as we talk about this, because people get, oh my gosh, what do they put next to me? In starter homes, so sometimes it's just that, and people get worried. They don't realize that that's your teachers and that's your starting police officers, the starting firefighters, EMS, and everyone else out there, and the men and women that are out there working that don't have the income and they're just getting out in the world and they're starting to work and all that to afford something in James City County, where they work. And I'd like to, concentrate as much as we can that this is, stays to James City County residents if possible. I know we can't discriminate on, there's so many laws and so many rules, but if we're trying to do something for our community, let's try to keep it within our community if possible. And that's a slippery slope and a tough one to be on. So it's my two things.
Good question.
Also, we have an aging population here that needs people to look after them, and so sometimes it's not just teachers and first responders. Sometimes it's nurses, aides, and CNAs, I guess would be but we like for those people to live in our community, and they're helping to provide a service to people that live here. So we don't want them to not be able to live in the community where they are providing an invaluable service. So, and maybe we all forget sometimes that we all had to start somewhere. So, when we didn't all start in a 2,400 square foot house. So,
I think to the point, sometimes purchasing a home is not necessarily what people can start out with or people can necessarily ever get to.
Right.
So I think the folks that you're talking about who are serving our community, the service industry, the folks who were just talking about who are currently out of work, we do have a housing choice voucher program. We do have some control over who we give priority to. So I know when you think about your neighbor, we can try and prioritize those folks who we already know, who are already in this community, who are already a part of this community, who could then get a chance, an opportunity to have, a more stable home. And, the majority of the folks who receive the voucher actually are working. We pull some statistics for that. So, that is something I think that people certainly have opinions, and we want to make sure that they recognize that we're trying to assist people here, so that we can make sure that we're taking care of folks all across the spectrum. So we have, a workforce, but we also have individuals who currently don't have a place to live. And if I may segue into a topic that I feel you guys have all could have had some information on, there is a current discussion underway about how we are going to support our residents most in need, especially come this winter season, who don't have a current place to reside. So we have had a winter shelter here for several years that is run through the Community of Faith Mission, and it's been a really wonderful program that has partnered with local churches, and the guests stay at the churches and get a safe place to sleep, get a meal, and and then either they go on their way or they get worked into other services to get them more permanent. So obviously with COVID happening, there's some concern about how we can do that safely. So we are in discussions with them. We've had one discussion. We're going to have another discussion coming up in the next couple of weeks because it's going to look different this season. We want to make sure that everybody, guests, volunteers, everybody is safe. And so the model that worked, that was allowed to work under the existing ordinance and exemptions that we have, probably won't work this season. So we are in discussions about that, and we want to make sure that we can support that so that everybody can have a safe place to sleep. Any longer term solution is going to require a larger conversation. And so we're not going to be talking about that today, but that may be something, again, we don't know how long this is going to last. We can make it work for this season with the partnerships that we have and the resources that we have, but any kind of longer term thing, as you all know, is a process. So I think once we settle in for this upcoming season, we'll be talking about how we can support this in general with everything going on, because we want to make sure everybody in our community is safe and has what they need.
So to make sure we understand, I believe that basically what we're saying is this is very much in a state of flux right now. You're working through it. That if we get to the point where we think we need to have some structural change to make it work for this fall, you will come back to us with and highlight the problem, and we can then some other options on how to try to deal with it.
Yes, absolutely. Fortunately, the folks who run the organization are talking about this now when it's summer, which is good. So we're trying to make sure we have something in place so we're not scrambling, come October to figure out what we're going to do. So
that would be my biggest word, to make sure that we have something, regardless of how it works out for winter, because it won't be long. Winter's going to be on top of us. And it's amazing how quick the years are going by, quicker and quicker and faster and faster. While we're in this pandemic and hotels and motels aren't being able to be utilized as much as they can, is there an opportunity to rent out a motel somewhere and for, the winter months and say, hey, you don't have income, what would be your bare bottom to rent this place out for the next 3 months, during the cold weather?
I think, there are existing things in place as far as time limits and things like that. So at this point, we're working within the time limits and things that we have. If we need to request a change for any of that, it is going to require, I'm kind of looking more to my community development counterpart, it is going to require a little bit different of a step. I think we, for example, are talking about it if, God forbid we have a hurricane or something and we need to set up a shelter. Do we do a congregate? Do we look, like you said, to one of our hotels? But all of that takes planning and time. And so we are already having those conversations as well, so that we can make sure that, like you said, there's some partnerships that we could potentially do. So any partnerships that we can do within what we currently have, we will do. Anything that we need further assistance and guidance and tweaks on, we will come back if we need to and say, this is what we need from you. But you'll be informed and you'll be communicated with as far as what's going to happen.
I know there's some items down in the Grove area as well that are going to be coming up. And as far as with the church, and that's one thing, have you in contact with anybody about that, how they're going to work through any issues that they may have in order to continue following our guidelines of this. If it's a church, you're
Yes.
good. If it's not a church, you're not.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden we lose that. We don't want
We do
to
not want
miss
to
that
lose.
opportunity.
No.
Okay.
No. So I think as things change from the original accessory exemption kind of things to more freestanding, there's changes that need to happen So yes, but we want those organizations to continue to exist.
Right.
But we have to have those conversations and kind of go through the steps so everybody gets the opportunity to weigh in and give their opinion and guidance on how it should happen.
And that'll come to us maybe sometime. It depends on how y'all work things out, and it may be a change to our current.
It could be, again, as Ms. Vinroot said, a lot of energy and focus now is how we continue to operate those thermal shelters and getting through the winter within the existing churches. Because right now they're allowed as accessory to churches. And as Ms. Vinroot said, we're having some real productive conversations right now with what's allowed and what can be done given these emergency situations with COVID to get through this winter. I think that's certainly the priority. I think some of those larger structural pieces about whether or not we change the ordinance to allow for some services like they do in Grove to occur sort of year round that aren't accessory to a church. Again, I think that's part of that larger conversation. I know we'll be talking about that at some level as part of this comprehensive plan update. Usually we get into comp plan implementation items and rewrites of the zoning ordinance as we look to follow on and follow after the adoption of the comp plan update. But I think those are a little bit separate efforts than ensuring that we have safe, warm places for this winter. I think that we can do under our existing regulations without needing a code amendment at this point, given these emergency situations.
But that one's still in the look as far as, and I just want to make sure that we have that something doesn't drop and all of a sudden we've got to scramble real fast.
Mr. If I might, if I think I know which case you're referring to, and that my understanding is that that's not really affected by the fact that there may not continue to be regular services being offered, that it would still be able to function.
Like they are now.
Yeah.
I know there was a thought of it may not due to our codes as a permanent structure.
But I did follow up on that. And
standalone, right, as a standalone. Yeah. But it would be, or is that something we may have to look at?
Right now, I mean, it needs to be
I know
accessory.
I threw you a curveball.
Needs to be accessory to the church, but like I say, that's a little bit different than the winter shelter.
Right, these are two separate items, but I was just trying to, rolling
right
that.
now, they would not have the ability to operate separately, independently. That's a different conversation.
Then that's something we may have to, may want to look into as maybe there's a net of some sort underneath that to get us through a period in case something like that were to happen. Just kind of looking out into the future of if this doesn't happen, then what happens to that? Because there's definitely a need, as John knows, and John's worked very hard with them and been very involved. And so he knows that need out there. And I'm just wondering in case there's anything that happens, that, John spent his lifetime, helping them. And so we'll make sure that if we need to do anything, we have the ability to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, thank you. And I know I appreciate the time you spent talking to me last week. What do most communities do with winter shelters? Is it something that municipalities run, or is it faith-based? Is it a split? What is it? And then if you could, don't have to answer tonight, but if you could send it to me, what I think the average was maybe 25, 26 at the last year okay. So I would be interested in that. And first of all, we're so fortunate to have these churches and the volunteers that do this, because I have not been as involved as I would like to have been, but I've been out to a couple of the sites. I've participated in the homeless memorial and just talking to to the volunteers that are out there and the effort that goes in. I'm just so very appreciative, and I'm sure that it's not, not everyone is captured to come to a shelter, and some of that is their own, they don't want to come into a shelter. But just the thought that 25, 26 people would be out on a very cold night is just a terrible thought. It's just terrible that someone is homeless in the first place. But so again, you don't have to answer tonight. I just would be curious as to how this is handled in other places. And I do appreciate I think you've got some things in the hopper so that hopefully this, because we are just probably figuring that we're going to have a bigger issue this winter, possibly, given the economic situation. So we've got to get creative there. And then there is a worry about the number of volunteers, the number of churches that are going to be able, for instance, my church, we're not back yet meeting in person. So, I don't know when we will be. But and then our volunteers at our church, it's an older population that volunteer. So, and I'm sure they're going to be worried about that as well. So anyway, there's just a couple questions in there that I would appreciate some feedback on.
I can answer a little bit.
Okay.
But I'll have to give you a little more information if you need it. But I do know that two localities very close to us are joining with the one here to make sure that they're supporting each other and working together. So they did present information to all of those localities to say, we need your help and support this winter in order to serve everybody. So I do believe that there's similar barriers just because of ordinances and things like that. So I don't think we're unique in having one or unique in the challenges to do it any differently. So, I will say that the good thing that this organization is doing is, spurring everybody to get together. It's not just, they don't just provide a service. We don't just provide a service. There's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of resources. And so the best thing we can do is we can talk together and to say, it's not going to look the same as it did last year. What can you do? What can you do? What can you do? And so, at the end of the day, social services, we're the safety net organization, and we're going to make sure if we know about somebody and they need assistance that we can provide that. But fortunately, we haven't had to exercise as much as that safety net because of resources and things that pop up. So they operate, they do their thing, and then as we say, we're the safety net if they need assistance. So I appreciate that they came to us. I appreciate that they're pulling the partners together so that we can say, what can everybody do to chip in? At the end of the day, though, we're the ones who make sure that people are safe and have what they need. So,
well, let me ask just one follow-up, because we're talking about winter, but it's also very hot here in the summertime. The library, I believe, is still closed. I think sometimes the library during the day becomes somewhat of a place for people to go. What is happening do we know what is happening to people right now that may be homeless, and what they're doing during the summer with COVID restrictions?
Well, between us and the city of Williamsburg, and our partners, we are making sure that individuals are in a safe residence. So as you said, we do have some funding coming down. We have some additional funding we're hoping to tap into. Because we know this is a marathon. So we know that, we're going to have to continue to assist folks. So what that looks like and when that happens, we'll probably go up and down with that. But as far as the cooling centers, our building has been open by appointment only, but it is open. We don't have a whole lot of space in our lobby. But, we are having those conversations with emergency management about, if something does happen. We do have our cooling program that operates through social services for folks in need. And then we're continuing to pay, utility bills and things. And there's other partners that also assist with utility bills. So if somebody gets to a situation where they can't pay to keep their air conditioning on, but they have it, we can assist them with that to keep it on so that they don't need to go somewhere. But those, like you said, those individuals who don't have any other place to go, we've been partnering. I mean, really, unfortunately, the winter shelter had to shut down early. So we kind of experienced being reactive when they had to shut down. And so now we're hoping to be proactive so that we don't have to scramble, at the end. So.
Thank you. Just so I can summarize, I think we've got basically board agreement for them to press on with the approach to that you're looking at, the affordable housing issue. And I look forward to seeing you bring something back to us here in a couple of months. So, okay. Alrighty. We can go to the next item, which is number 6, resolution in support of redesignation of the local workforce development areas 14 and 16 into a new single local workforce development area.
That is also me. So you may or may not be aware, but in this region, there have been 2 local workforce boards. So there's the Peninsula one, and then there's the Hampton Roads one. So the resolution that we're asking you to support is to combine those 2. So I think the discussions that we've had, and we have voices at the table who are going to make sure that our voice doesn't get lost. But I think from a staffing perspective, from a opportunity to kind of be able to share resources and things, we are supporting this joining. But again, we just, we'll make sure that our voice is heard with that. So if there are any questions.
Just to follow up on Ms. Winroot's presentation, I circulated materials to you all late last fall, early winter, about this proposal to merge the 2 workforces, and the only feedback I really received was that let's just make sure that we're not going to get lost in the shuffle, and raise that issue directly with the folks who are heading the 2 organizations, and was assured that, especially with the opening of the new facility at Thomas Nelson here at the historic campus, that they certainly understand the importance of this area and would make sure that we are treated fairly. And I think the interesting thing about this proposal is that it's part of a movement of the 2 workforce boards toward a much more entrepreneurial kind of approach, where they've been working to identify models around the country and have focused in particular on one in southeastern Connecticut that has become extremely successful in putting together programs, generating resources for training, and has really become a very, very powerful source of training folks for employment and connecting employers with qualified workers.
So what, do you know what Thomas Nelson's plans are moving forward with the historic triangle? Would that be at all, do they plan to open this fall? Do you know? And
I thought that they had already had their soft opening in that facility, but maybe not yet.
I could have probably answered that 4 months ago, but trying to think about what, because I know they were gearing up. There were meetings about it, meetings there. I feel like July was a date that was tossed around, or April.
Yeah, they were trying to do a soft opening this spring, and I think maybe the fact that COVID intervened in all of this has affected that. But the space that was identified is very prominent. It's as you come into the main building at Thomas Nelson, and there's going to be staff dedicated to focusing on training efforts there.
I think, as Mr. McGlinnan said, the fact that we're going to get that is going to help, because I think right now one of the concerns is that individuals have to go to Hampton to get services. And so, we do have the ability to offer services in our building. We still have that computer lab. We still have that. We're still accepting people by appointment to use that currently, but having something like Thomas Nelson, it just has more resources right down there. So we're ready to support that whenever that is ready.
Mind just following up with them and asking when they might? Thank you.
I have a meeting on Thursday, and I'll ask the question of what the status is at this point.
That'd be great. Thank y'all.
And I would offer that having been on this thing for a long time until John took it over. It's been a slow evolution toward this, and I think it's all for the best, because I think we're getting better bang for our buck now with the cooperation that the 2 groups have put together over the last few years, and I think eventually merging this will be beneficial for us. So I would support it. Okay. All right. if
Oh,
there are.
Mr.
Need a
Chairman, I
motion?
would move, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I move to approve the resolution.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the resolution. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. McGlinnan,
Aye.
Mr. Hippel,
Aye.
Ms. Larson,
Aye.
Ms. Sadler,
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. And then number 7, CARES and FEMA funding. Ms. Day, you're on.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. What I wanted to do tonight was really provide more of a high-level overview of the various COVID funding sources that we've been awarded to date, both the funding sources and also the expected uses of those funds. Currently, to date, we are aware of 7 different COVID-19 funding sources to the tune of about $7.2 million. Each of those have their own eligibility requirements. They also have different time period restrictions for using those dollars. The majority of that $7.2 million is the most recent funding that we received. That's what we refer to as the CARES Act. That funding source was about $6.7 million. We have received that funding in advance. That is unusual. So of course we were very thankful to receive that. We received all of that money in one lump sum back on June the 1st. So that money is in the bank. Of that funding source, the majority of that has gone to the school division, about $1.7 million, which was dispersed on June the 15th. The schools, my understanding is the schools are utilizing that funding for tablets and laptops to continue in their virtual learning environment status. The other part of that, or the largest part of that, is also for the economic stimulus grants, which you approved recently to the tune of about $500,000. That check has also been written. I believe that money went to the Greater Williamsburg Partnership to oversee that program. The rest of the funding that we've spent so far has gone to county expenditures, and that amounts to about $500,000. The majority of which are for things like mask, disinfectant, cleaning supplies, temperature scanners, as well as some technology so that we can continue to work remotely as well, and also expand our services to the public to include things like Zoom meetings, virtual environments. We've had to purchase an additional server just to have some additional storage space so that we can continue to operate virtually as well. So in summary of that $6.7 million, which we received on June the 1st, we are about 3 weeks in, and we have spent or committed about half of it, about $3.3 million. We are aware of several other requests for that funding. We have started to receive additional requests from some of our funding partners, some of the other outside entities. For example, the Williamsburg Regional Library, I know they are very interested in using the same thermometer scanners that we've recently received. We've also started hearing from the Juvenile Detention Center about some potential hazard duty pay to some of their employees. We're also looking at additional healthcare claims that we've had to pay for our employees. We've started tracking and working with our consultants so that we can get an idea of what that cost is. We believe it's somewhere in the $200,000 to $300,000 range, but of course that continues to move as more cases and things develop. As you know, we've also waived the credit card convenience fees to anyone that wants to pay online. We're also working with our providers to quantify what that dollar amount has been. And we continue to work with the school division on their ongoing needs. We know that there are some additional costs that they're looking at, and they're also trying to figure out their plans going forward. One concern of which is busing the students, and just the operation of concern, maybe not necessarily additional buses, because I know they are challenged with bus drivers and filling those driver positions, but perhaps more frequent trips. Because they're not able to accommodate as many children on the buses. That would include additional operating costs such as the fuel, additional mileage, which technically or typically translates into additional maintenance, as well as additional payroll hours for those bus drivers going back and forth and having to make more trips. So Again, the 3.3 million is what we've spent. We have ongoing needs. We are aware, at least at this point, that we're not able to use any of that funding for any revenue shortfalls. That continues to be our biggest challenge to date. And this funding source also does expire on December 30th, which will also be an ongoing challenge for us. I did want to highlight some of the additional funding sources as well. I mentioned that we have a total of 7. The one I just highlighted, of course, is the largest, but we were successful in obtaining some other funding. We received about $85,000 that we are utilizing to help make up a revenue shortfall for the Medic Recovery Program. And so those dollars were awarded to us from the Department of Health and Human Services, and that money was also advance funded. And that money is in the bank. If we do not have a revenue shortfall that quantifies to $85,000, we are able to utilize that for some additional expenses that we're incurring as a result of responding to COVID-related cases. We also received a $47,000 grant, social services, which is utilizing that for sheltering purposes, either for folks that have tested positive for COVID-19 or for individuals that were either exposed as a result of COVID-19 or also are under a high-risk group category and require further social distancing. We received a $34,000 grant that the police department did from the Department of Juvenile Services. This funding, although it was awarded to the police department, is available to anyone, any department in the county, and it can be used for very similar expenses as the $6.7 million CARES Act funding. So this is for items such as masks and gloves, any of those initiatives to help protect the public. We received a $40,000 grant in the housing department. This is being utilized to cover safety equipment for the building so that staff and clients can continue to serve the public. We're purchasing some laptops for the housing staff so they can continue to work remotely, as well as some video conferencing equipment and various office supplies. Housing also received a grant for $348,000, which is being utilized to assist 83 households to provide payments of past due rent as well as utilities for renter-occupied housing units. And finally, we're aware of one more funding source, which is through our typical channel, which is FEMA. This is the program we typically utilize for natural disasters such as hurricanes. We refer to it as a public assistance funding. There's not a dollar amount that's been determined or a time period restriction to date because the COVID-19 is an ongoing scenario. What we are recommending in FMS at this point is that we continue to monitor all the expenditures, but that we keep in mind the grants that have the most restrictions as well as the shortest time period, and that we utilize those grant funding opportunities first, and then we move on to the other funding sources from there. I did also want to mention that we were notified about 8 weeks ago or so by the school division that they also received some CARES Act funding directly. They'll receive those dollars from the Department of Education, also being utilized for virtual learning opportunities. That funding is not related to the county. We do not receive the money directly. My understanding is that they will receive those funds directly, and that dollar amount was about $1.2 million. I did also want to mention one additional requirement related to the 6.7 because we did award some money to the school division and we are receiving additional requests from some of our other funding partners. In conjunction with the county attorney's office, we did come up with a form, what we call a certification form, so that anyone that we're remitting payment to understands the eligibility requirements, and also that these dollars are subject to federal and special audits. It will certainly undergo our local audit, but we are highly anticipating that we will also have federal and state agencies eventually auditing this money as well. So we need to make sure that all the proper documentation is being maintained, not just by the sub-grantee, but also as us. It is ultimately our responsibility to make sure that we meet all the requirements, and that all the dollars that are being paid are supported by documentation. At this point, some of the entities don't have the funds to pay for the dollars and request reimbursement. This was the case in the school division, so we advanced the funding based on quotes and solid estimates, and we are requiring that paid documentation be remitted to us within 10 days of paying the vendors. That's it for me. Questions?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I would like to mention too, we're talking, Ms. Day and I, with other communities and our counterparts, trying to figure out where they're using CARES money. Some other things we have talked about, she did put in the schools area of, can we do small, it will do cable extensions of broadband to homes with children that don't have access to internet. But it's got to be done by the end of December. So it can't be a large scale project, but if we have neighborhoods and we're reaching out to Cox, trying to figure out where are neighborhoods that have requested it, that reached out to the school division to find out where they have children's homes that don't have cable, because they have a pretty good idea of that. And can we talk with Cox and get coax cable run to those areas before the end of December? And in some initial conversations, I am certain we can do some of that. I'm not sure how much. I don't want to set an expectation that we will serve everywhere, but we will do what we can, and we are working through that unless you change our direction, and hope to have something for you in the coming months, because it would need to happen very quickly. But I think short runs of the coax cable doesn't take a lot of design and engineering. It is really knowing the system limitations and extending the cable to those areas. So we are working through that, trying to get students that will likely do some sort of distance learning in the fall and haven't had access to maybe reliable internet would have better access. So that's one area. And then within our county facilities, we can't build a new building in 7 months that would make us better COVID prepared, but we can move some doorways, we can add some windows, we can build better public reception counter space. So we're trying to look through some of those ideas of defending that money. And it really comes really back to Ms. Day and I to defend that the use of the money meets the requirements, because the guidance that's out there, as we're told, is really all we're getting. But we're trying to do what other communities are doing, so together we all have some maybe a cooperative defense when we're under an audit condition some years from now. So,
is there, and one of my questions was internet across the county with this COVID money, because, well, I've got 3 right now that we have no internet. And it's been very difficult to keep up with school and everything else. We're having to drive somewhere over to my office, get the internet, and drive back and use hotspots and that sort of thing. And if it's cloudy, hotspots will and won't work. So it's been very challenging. My wife has done an excellent job, but gets very frustrated with the internet and a few other things, but I won't mention those on Cox. Is there a way to, I really want to push internet across the county from one end to the other. And I'm going to keep pushing it. And it's a shame that Cox doesn't supply it, because if you're not big enough or don't have enough people in that area, that's too bad. We're going on to the next group, and which is a shame, but that's business and that's the way they work. And I've had my opinions on what that is, and I won't stop. And that can be assured of. But I think that with this COVID money, is there a way to enter into a contract of X with Cox to get internet across the county and say, we're entering a contract due upon December 31st to meet this, but may not have everything in place?
I think we'll have to talk about that, Mr. Hibble. I think the short answer is I think we can do some. We don't know where Cox is or isn't. They will sort of tell us, but not give us anything that I can really work from to know what that number would be. So we have had those conversations to sort of start that dialogue. I think looking at maps, we would say we're fairly well covered within James City County, but there are some areas without. Right. And so I think some of those areas absolutely can get done before the end of December. My understanding of the CARES Act money, it needs to be spent, and you have to have the thing in hand by December 30th. So if there's a cable project that takes 1.5 years to build, I don't think there's any opportunity to get it under contract and then it's not available until next summer. It's got to be ready, as I would understand the rules today, by the end of December. If it's not spent and built and delivered, we can't order something in December that comes in the summer and use CARES money. It has to be done by the end of December. It's the period between March early March and December 30th.
It
And
was
so,
March 1st and December 30th, and I do think that falls into the prepayment category, and that is specifically excluded.
So if we, let's take it down to a smaller scale. Say we order 5,000 masks on December 1st. They're supposed to be here on the 30th, but they don't get here till the 1st, and we have to take that out.
I think if you've procured it, and it's just a matter of not receiving it, and it's a material and it's a vendor issue, it would probably qualify. But when you get into construction, if it's a long-term construction project, because it specifically talks about that, like preparing your buildings and some of those things, that would be excluded.
and Mr. Hill, I think it comes back to us having to interpret that. Some things are very clear that you can or cannot. And I would argue if we're trying to order, we said a fire truck was COVID related. We order a fire truck in October, knowing it's not going to be delivered next summer. I don't think we could start that as a defensible. We order masks in December that we expect to have by December 30th, and there's some strange thing that they're delayed. I think we would still charge them for that. The risk is the county's going to have to pay it back. So you don't want to get overextended, because the risk is if it doesn't qualify in an audit in 2 years or 5 years, you've got to pay it back then. And we wouldn't want to set the county up to have to make a significant payment back.
When it comes to supplies, and without getting too technical, you get into GASB too, and this very much follows the accounting rules. And so in the case of a material like mask, it's going to look and say, when is the title to those masks transfer? If it transfers as soon as it's shipped to you, it's your property, whether it's been received or not. Therefore, it's an eligible expense. If it doesn't transfer till we actually receive it, then it's not. It's technically still the vendor's inventory. So we start getting into those kinds of things.
So would there be a way to write that agreement in that it would transfer upon payment?
For the mask?
No, for the cable.
Cable.
I haven't seen that before.
There's always
because that's not an inventoriable item.
And because I'm trying to look for a way to pay for it now, but I'm gonna keep pushing internet across the county, because this is not gonna be the last time our children are not gonna have internet. And when I was talking to several of the board members, I told them I was going to push this as well across the county. And I know my board members are for it as well, of whether we pay for it now or pay for it later. You know, if we can get part of it paid for, that's great. And then we take the other. But we've got the center of the county is pretty good, and we're pretty well served. I'm not bashing Cox totally. We're pretty well served. Got a few issues with it, but we're pretty well served. But the far end of the county and the other far end of the county and some of the spots on each side are not. And I think it's a shame, as rich as we are, all the technology we have, and you can't use it. And I think it's our responsibility on this board is in order to try to open that up, especially if our children, hey, Jimmy and Johnny, y'all go home, but there's no way you can study. There's no way you can do it. You know, we're going to go into a situation where if this continues, we're going to have parents working. And now all of a sudden, are they, you know, one's having to work this day, one's having to work this day. The children are home. There's no internet. Now at night, we've got to take them here and we've got to take them there. We've got to figure out where we can get it. Can we go down to the neighbor's house? Can we go to grandma's house to get it? And that's going to be a tough scenario with all the other stresses that our parents are going through for the school children that we know is gonna, it's almost a guarantee that we're gonna have an issue this fall. And I'm just trying to, I know we can't get it all solved, but I'm trying to solve part of it. And if we can use some of this money for that and the rest we have to pay, you know, I don't know what the cost is. It probably less than what we think, I'm imagining. It's probably going to be a little bit less. And if we partner with Cox and say, look, you're coming up for renewal in a year and a half, I would suggest we work together on this and come out with a game plan. That would be my say to Cox. And if I had a chance to sit down with them and discuss the issue. But, and I think, it would give the people the opportunity then to be able to have their children educated and stay up with the school system. It's going to take stress off the school system as well. And they're going to be able to, okay, they've got it. We're good there. And so
Well, and I will say that we typically do have conversations with our funding agencies anytime we get into a questionable item, such as this, where it's just something new we haven't done before, and that would be certainly something we could do, is start working. We have a direct contact that we talk to fairly regular basis and let them know, here are some of the ideas that we have that we'd like to do, here's how it's COVID related, and get that guidance up front. Probably the sooner we have that conversation, the better.
This would be like my priority one for me on this item. And I know it's a little selfish, but I think we need to do it for our school children. And so if we could find out about that, and if we can't pay for all of it, if we can pay for some of it, and then we figure out how we're going to pay for the rest of it, at least the school board knows, and the parents and teachers and all know that this board is exactly what we said we were going to do. And it's right here on this paper as well, another $2.9 million to the schools, if I'm adding this correctly. And so, you know, there's another item that this body and y'all are working on to find every dollar we can to get back to the school system to make them whole. So, you know, we were villains there for a little while, but we weren't really, but you know, we had a little cape on or something. But now we're moving in. We're trying to find every dollar. And this is another component of trying to find every dollar, is to make sure that, you know, we have internet across the county for our children, that they can keep up as well as possible with all the changes that they've got to deal with. That's too much.
I would ask, I think Mr. Stevens indicated that we've got a pretty good working relationship with the schools right now, and I think they are the ones who are going to be able to help us more properly focus and identify where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck for as much as we can, as quick as we can. And I think that's the first step we need to do. As much as we can, as quick as we can, working with the schools and get that extended, and then go from there. So,
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I did talk with the superintendent months ago about this in terms of using CARES money, and she was very supportive. If we could figure out how to use some of this funding to get internet service and broadband to homes that are underserved or not served, they would very much, anyhow, would very much support that use of the CARES Act money as well.
Thank you. Appreciate your help on that.
Yeah, and I think it is something we ought to think about, both in terms of using CARES money to get started on this, and then maybe thinking about it as a regular part of our capital improvements program.
Yep.
Over time. I had a couple of questions, if I could, Ms. Davis. First, at one point we were talking about the 6.7 million as half of the money that would be allocated. Is that now we no longer have that expectation, or?
That is the full allocation to us. We receive it in one lump sum payment.
Okay, and so we're not expecting any significant additional federal money at this point, unless the next effort to address the economic recovery includes something.
That's my understanding.
Is the state not holding half of the 6?
Yes. Well,
So
no, not half of the 6, half of the total allocation.
Half of the total out.
Yes.
So we got the 6, but there's another 6.7 that the state is holding right now. And because it was 11 or 12 altogether. And so there's this that we received, but there's another 6 point something sitting out there waiting.
I'm not sure, Mr. Temple, because my original understanding from NACO's figures was that we were to get about 6.7 million, and I think that there was perhaps some mistranslation between Washington and Richmond and us that made it seem like this was half of our allocation.
This is half, but they pointed out that they're under no obligation to even give us this, because it's not in the language and it's not in the guidelines, but they were going to give us the localities, not just James City. They get the other half in July, but they have not committed to passing that on. They may decide to keep it all in Richmond.
And to what end? Because obviously,
what end would they spend it on?
Right. Because half of all the state budget is money that's transferred to localities.
They have not shared that.
Yeah.
They just, the only thing that they have shared is that they're under no obligation to do what they've done, but they've done it, and they won't speak to the other amount.
That is my understanding as well.
Yeah. And I noticed payroll. So I'm assuming that this would include the ability to pay for the cost of a person who might have the responsibility at the library of checking temperatures of every patron who's
Yes.
coming into the building and so
Yes.
forth. So,
Correct.
Mhm. And we're looking actively for any other opportunities to utilize the remaining funding.
We have. I know one of the positions you just recently approved was for a building and custodian superintendent. And this COVID funding is going to fund that position through December 30th. One of the things that we need to be certain that we do is when we advertise for those positions and when we have the job descriptions posted, that we have the COVID-19 related responsibilities included therein, so that we can document that this is very clearly tied to that funding. But we do continue to pursue opportunities. I know there's been other discussions with other departments that are also having staffing issues as a result of some additional things we're needing to do to monitor the public. For example, satellite services, since that falls under me, I know that we've incurred some additional personnel just to kind of help monitor social distancing rules and that type of thing. And we've had some temporary help out there, and we plan to utilize the COVID funding to reimburse for that cost.
And I know we did some relief for businesses earlier on with money that we're expecting that we've gotten back, we'll get back from COVID, the CARES Act money. And I mentioned this to Mr. Stevens, the question about, we do have a number of nonprofits in the community that are under significant stress, and that there may be some opportunities for those nonprofits that actually do things that we rely on, perhaps just to think about providing some assistance to them in return for those kinds of activities that they undertake on our behalf.
Yes, we've been working with the departments to estimate future needs, and that has been included from Mrs. Van Root and the anticipated cost between July 1st and December 30th.
So I find it interesting that we are so, we're talking about the audit, and I'm so proud of that we're sticking to it, because I don't know whether I shared or not, but a colleague in another jurisdiction commented on her social media page that they were able to make up their budget gap with schools using this CARES money. And so I wrote and said, how are you doing this? Because we are being told that we cannot use revenue replacement. And I've not gotten an answer. So
is the post still there?
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe gone. But so I'll be curious to see if the government, I still, don't get me wrong, we need to do the right thing. I'll be curious to see how it all comes out in the end, if they stick to that, and if they do have localities that maybe aren't doing what they need to do, paying it all back. I wondered about, and I do appreciate the broadband, because I don't think, it's not looking as though it's going to be 5 days a week this fall. Maybe that'll be proven wrong. I do wonder about the school system. What if there's a teacher who says, you know what, I don't feel comfortable coming back to the classroom this fall because of COVID? Does that open up the school board to then say, okay, well, then we suggest that you take a year leave or whatever, FMLA or whatever, with other different options they have. We're going to hire a teacher to take your place this year. Can that be done? Can that position come under COVID and be paid through December?
The position that's related to COVID, yes, but the person that would be on FMLA getting paid would be
right.
no.
That I knew, yeah. but okay. And then I just had one other question and I do appreciate these grants, and thank you for this explanation as well. The Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development 348-104, the approximately 83 households, that was about $4,100 per household. So I was curious as to, was it like getting somebody brought up? So not only were the rent that was in arrears, but also the current month's rent paid as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That explains the amount then.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, I will, on the economic stimulus grant that we did, I've gotten several calls on that, one just the other night. And it was a very interesting call, because the person was very excited. It went through really quick, and they were talking about how much that helped their company in order to stay in business. They can't wait till they're up and running full speed so they can pay that back. And because that's part of that grant system, if you can, please put back in and pay it forward. And she just called to thank me and tell the board how much she thanks all of us and staff and everything for putting this together and putting this out there. She said that money made a big difference in her ability to move forward. So I was glad to hear that. It's good to put something out there and then hear something back that it is making a difference in someone's life. And she's not the only one, but she was a recent one who called me and talked about how much it meant to her company and her life and what they were doing. So I was glad to hear that. And there was something else I had. Oh, Cox. I'm going back to Cox and I'll get off of it. But if they put drops in and don't bury, they can do multiple drops in different locations that they don't have to bury right away. That then will hook you up and have power or have internet, and then they come in and bury later. But that's once it's hooked, it's billed. So we could go around and go, okay, maybe you can't get them all, but maybe we get even more and just do drops. And they put the drops in, and then they come in later when it fits their schedule and bury them. You may have to live with a drop in your yard for X amount of time, but at least it gets a lot more connections out quicker that we can spend this money. And in that way, we're not, we got to drop it. We're going to bury it in 3 months, and then we'll be, they drop it, build out the door, they come back later and bury it. So, way to get around the system.
We'll work with them as much as we can and be back to the board to talk about, I hope, some projects in the near future.
Thank you. Okay, I think that takes us through the board requests and directives. Anybody got anything? No, sir. I think we've covered it.
Just real briefly, I actually had the first in-person meeting last week, Wednesday, the jail meeting, and 3 of us went to the jail. However, the Zoom piece did not work, so we had to cancel our meeting. And then just as a reminder, the Tourism Council will meet in July, but we do have our finance meetings. They are open meetings. We have those still monthly. If any of you are interested in joining, I don't know if our next one will be Zoom, but I'm happy to get you all the information for that. And then hope that you have registered for the VACO conference, which this year will be in Norfolk and is scheduled to be in person. And the Homestead is doing a renovation of 200 rooms, and they are supposed to open back up next year. And the reason it is at the Homestead is because it is in a county. It is the only place in a county that can accommodate the VACO conference. But as you can imagine, with COVID, that may have set them behind a little bit. But right now they are planning to be back there next year. But this year we will be in Norfolk for VACO. So.
I'm good. I've said enough.
Sue, do you have anything?
I'm good. Thank you all.
Okay, based on that, then I will take a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on July 14th for a regular meeting. Motion? We have a motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye. Motion to adjourn. You have it.
Call this meeting of the James City Service Authority Board of Directors, regular meeting to order. Good afternoon, Mr. Powell. Thank you for your patience and going behind.
Good
Appreciate
afternoon,
it.
no problem.
And so with that, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. McGlennon. Here. Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower. Ms. Larson.
Here. We do need a motion to allow Ms. Sadler to participate remotely due to an illness that prevents her from attending the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Powell, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. McGlennon.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye. Ms. Sadler, do you designate the vice chair as the presiding officer for today's meeting?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment today?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. With that, that brings us to the consent calendar. I need a motion to approve the consent calendar. It's 1 minute's adoption.
Motion for approval.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. We have a board consideration today. We need a motion to enter closed session for the following. Closed session discussion or consideration of the investment of public funds regarding a conditional settlement agreement related to an easement dispute where competition or bargaining is involved, where if made public initially, the financial interest of the JCSA would be adversely affected pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A6 of the Code of Virginia, in consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters, requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pertaining to the contract with Newport News and a conditional settlement agreement related to an easement dispute pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A8 of the Code of Virginia, and discussion of the award of public contract involving the expenditure of public funds, where discussion in an open body would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body regarding an easement and infrastructure relocation project related to a conditional settlement agreement pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A29 of the Code of Virginia. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Thank you. Mr. Powell, will you call the roll?
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye. So we are in closed session. May I have a motion to certify the closed session?
Madam Chair, I move to certify that we only spoke about those items we indicated we would speak about in closed session.
Thank you. Mr. Powell, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye. Is there a
And
motion?
I would move a resolution authorizing acceptance of a conditional settlement agreement contract award with Colonial Heritage for main relocation of $274,100.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye. Thank you very much. With that, were there anything further in board requests or directives?
I know we're running late. I did have one item.
General manager.
General
Yes,
manager's
sorry.
update. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Can we,
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Okay.
So I'll do this very briefly, but given the uncertainty that we're living in today, I thought that moving forward, what I would like to do is provide you as part of a monthly report, just where we are on certain monthly indicators. So I'll run through this very quickly. I'll email it to you, but my intention is that this is going to become sort of a part of your monthly packet. The idea is that these indicators will either give you comfort that that we're where we should be, or that they will be an early warning system that we're not. So actually, I think can I control it? Yeah. So the first slide is water service revenue. We're going back 3 years. You can see FY20, we're currently at 8.2 million. Our budget was 9.2 million. We still have part of June, and then we also have accruals. So we're in pretty good shape there. You know, we think we're going to meet our target there, or at least come very close. Same true with sewer service revenue. We believe we're pretty much on target there. The next two slides are the water tap fees and the wastewater tap fees, and we've talked about this. We are not on target for these two indicators, and these graphs indicate that. So I don't think this is a surprise, but again, we're just going to start providing this information monthly to give you an idea of where we are. This chart shows our monthly water production. You know, you can see from 2019 to 2020, I mean, we have 8 days left in 2020, and we're within 50 million gallons of what was used in 2019. So, which tells me basically that I don't believe that COVID-19 had a huge impact on our water production one way or the other. But having said that, the next slide is pretty interesting. Oh, went too far. This shows our daily water production. The orange, this shows 2 years. The orange line is the current fiscal year. The blue line is fiscal year 19. You can see our demand was a little higher in the fall and this year than it was last year. It did drop a little, like in the May timeframe. I think that probably had as much to do with how wet it is, though. I don't necessarily draw from any of this that the coronavirus has had a significant, maybe slight, but I don't think it's had a significant impact on our operations at this point. That could change, but you know, at this point, I think generally speaking, these graphs show there hasn't been a huge impact. Because again, the tap fee issue existed before the coronavirus hit. This is a commercial account consumption. Again, I don't think, you know, any huge surprise. Came down in April from May, but went back up some, or from March, but went back up some in May. I thought I would provide some information on delinquencies. You know, hasn't gone up dramatically, but it has gone up some since March. So I think that does tell us that's something that we need to keep an eye on. And this is the delinquency for commercial accounts. Same conclusion, it's gone up some, not dramatically, but probably enough that it's something we need to keep an eye on. Last one, we have a new phone system which allows us to easily track the number of calls that we get. So we've only had it for like a month, so there's not a lot of data to report, but this just shows you by the week how many telephone calls you know, that we get on a weekly basis. So it's just
kind of a workload indicator. This is a work in progress. We may tweak this. If there's anything that you would like for us to include in this that's not in there, please let me know. But again, the intent is to provide this information to you on a monthly basis in this time of uncertainty to give you a more frequent check-in on where we are with our finances, our water production, delinquencies, workload, those sorts of things.
Thank you. All right, with that, I will ask for a motion to continue till 5 p.m. on July 14th, 2020.
That's right. Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
And I'll have made the motion.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And with that, we're adjourned. Or we're
we're losing that history, that archaeological history. So we're trying to preserve for that archaeological history, and in some of the areas we're trying to preserve the roadways and just our landmass.